We were about, I'd say 6 weeks away from the start of Vacation Bible School at Providence United Methodist Church. And I had gathered all of the mothers that were on my children's ministries team. We were in one of the classrooms having a meeting, probably about the third or fourth one we'd had. And all of a sudden, Claire announces to the whole group, "We have a problem. The mothers are telling me our older children don't want to come to VBS this year. They think that they're too big for songs and crafts and all the things that go on at VBS." Now, the five of us, we just kind of sat around the table and we looked at each other. Then we looked at the table and, we're just kind of all like, you know. Suddenly, Claire said, "You know what? I'd like to see us do something with these older children. They don't want traditional VBS anymore, but I'd like us to do something with them that would teach them, that would help them learn to grow in the Lord." She said, "How about if we could come up with something where we got them involved with the older members of the church, and then they kind of help to get to know them and do something to serve them?" So all of a sudden burst of enthusiasm and inspiration took over the group for this idea. And by the time we were done with it, we had even named it the Service Squad, where our older children would learn what it meant to help others. Somebody said, "Well, we're down to 6 weeks. How are we going to let everybody know about this?" And as usual, my mouth engaged before my brain, and I said something to the effect of, "Oh, well, that's easy. I'll just preach a sermon on serving." After all, the words serve, service, servant, they all appear over 1,000 times in the Bible. We'll get the kids with what we've got planned, I told them. And what we had planned was going over to the older members' homes, cleaning up their yards and mowing their yards, and then doing things like going to help out at a dog rescue, going out to the Hebron Colony Ministries Grace Home over in Santee and working with the ladies that were out there. And somebody says, "Well, wait, that's great. We've got the kids. At least we think we do. But what about the adults we're going to need?" somebody asked. "What if they don't volunteer?" Well, then, once again, my mouth took over before my brain engaged. And before I could stop myself, I said, "Well, I guess I'll just have to go visit them and tell them that they did volunteer, that they had volunteered for what is our third Christian practice in the Adam Hamilton book: service. Serving the Lord means doing his work in the world. God's primary mode of working in this world is through people. Adam Hamilton says we are called to heal the world and to help others. I like to say that we are called to be the hands, the feet, the voice, and the love in action of God. So now, these adults that I was going to convince had volunteered, even if they really hadn't, well, what exactly had they volunteered for? I think that they were volunteering for exactly what we all have volunteered for if we are seeking to follow Jesus. And that means walking with Jesus, following him, means we'll be asking how. How are we caring for those who are marginalized, the vulnerable and the poor, those that Jesus referred to in his parable as the least of these? When it comes to our understanding and hopefully our practice of serving, the two great commandments form the basis of that understanding. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And the second, you shall love the neighbor as yourself. So on that VBS, that year at Providence United Methodist Church, We set out to serve together. We had about 10 to 12-year-olds, and not including me, we had about 4 other adults. We set out to love our neighbors in that community. That went from mowing the yards to finding out that not everybody can drive the riding mower in a straight line, okay? Came to trimming shrubbery, which looked more like it had been attacked by some mad person with clippers, to bathing dogs where the children came out wetter than the dogs, to watching a group of girls being given a homemade straw broom for sweeping and watching them hold it in their hand and look at it. Finally going, I don't know what to do with it. And to sometimes it went to discovering what Adam Hamilton says, that love is not a feeling, but it's a way of living and it's a way of being. And for 5 days, this group went out every morning to serve and to love. And we found out that the old adage, practice makes perfect, is true. We were much better at it by the end of the week because now we were willing to do what we were sent to do. Those first few days, the children, everybody, was there because someone made them be there. Their parents made them be there, and I guess if you'd ask the adults, they'd say, I, the preacher, made them be there. And if you asked me why I was there, I'd say because I, the preacher, made me be there. But we went from the point of having to be there to the point of wanting to be there, to the place where we were willing to serve. And I noticed another thing that happened about midway, and that was that the attitudes changed. Our author suggests that to walk with God, to be a follower of Christ, is to be a servant. And one of the primary ways we serve is by practicing kindness towards others. God created us to care for each other as members of this human family and as members of the family of God. And about halfway through that week, the sarcasm kind of left, and the sniping that preteens and teens can do at each other, that kind of ended as well. And then the ability to pivot from one task to the other came into effect. Now, each morning before we set off to the location we were going to be at that day, we had a meeting. We talked about where we were going to be, what we thought we were going to accomplish there, and in many ways, we handed out assignments so that once we got there, we could immediately start working. Well, most of the time, when we got there, things had to change. Adam Hamilton talks about the concept of being open to divine interruptions, to be involved in something, to be ready to do something, to have your day set out, and then you're interrupted. And you're asked by God, literally, change. I need you to do this instead. Well, we went, in our case, to that's not fair, and I wanted to do that, and you told me I could do that, to, okay, whatever you need me to do, I'll do that instead. It's fine. Well, sometimes the divine interruptions for the kids meant just maybe you needed to sit and talk, or maybe you needed to even sit and listen. I went looking for the girls one time during this VBS, and we were at Edward and Mildred Schuler's home. Now, Edward and Mildred were a brother and sister, never married. As a matter of fact, they were living in the actual house that they had been born in. And it was one of those rambling, white, wooden frame, 2-story houses. They were born in that house. They had lived in that house their whole lives. And at this point, they were both in their 70s. Well, I went looking for my group of girls because the boys were outside. And I kept listening, and I finally heard them upstairs. I got upstairs, and my girls are kind of sitting around either on the floor or leaning against furniture or something. Mildred, never married now, self taught, was showing them examples of taxidermy. Yes, Mildred taught herself to do taxidermy. And all the girls are like, but Mildred's over there explaining to them how you do it. She's showing them the examples of what she's done. The next time I go outside, I look for my boys, and they're all kind of sitting over under a tree, and Edward, the brother, is holding court. And Edward and Mildred were known in the community. They had made all these handmade, life-size Christmas decorations. Every year, the two of them struggled, put them up all over their yard and their house with lights. And you would drive your car in one way, in the driveway. You'd take a turn. You'd go all the way around the house, come back out again. And there'd be a little bucket there, and you could put in a donation if you wanted to. Edward was out there. He was giving them the story of every decoration that he made. And he was telling them about which piece of woodworking equipment he used. And the boys are out there like, but sometimes the divine interruption meant God needed you to sit and listen and serve him and serve this individual by giving them your time and your attention. Yes, it was a challenge. And no, we didn't always finish what we planned. But I guarantee you this. We finished what God had planned for us that day. Now, what if everyone in this church became intentional about pursuing one act of kindness each day? What would be accomplished for the Lord? And how many lives would be touched and would be transformed if we all set out to perform one act of kindness? Doesn't have to be anything big. Something as simple as a phone call. Something as simple as sending a card in the mail. So you ask yourself, all right, what day should I pick to do my one act of kindness? Well, now you know what? That's easy. You remember Adam Hamilton and how he uses our hands as reminders? Hold your hand up. How many fingers? How many acts of kindness? How many blessings? How many times a week to serve as we say to God, here I am, Lord. Send me.